Part 2. The conversation behind the closed door. I wish I could tell you that I stood up from that folding table. I wish I could tell you that I confronted everyone. That I demanded answers. That I refused to be treated like an afterthought. But I didn't. I sat there, smiling politely, pretending everything was fine. Just like I had done countless times before. Because that's what many mothers learn to do. We swallow disappointment. We hide hurt feelings. We convince ourselves that keeping the peace is more important than telling the truth. So I ate my dinner. I nodded during conversations. I laughed when everyone else laughed. And inside, something slowly broke. The worst part wasn't the seating arrangement. It wasn't being forgotten. It wasn't even being ignored. The worst part was realizing that nobody thought they were doing anything wrong. To them, this was normal. To them, I had simply become background furniture. Something always present. Rarely noticed. Never appreciated. After dinner, people scattered throughout the house. The children ran downstairs to play. The younger adults gathered around the television. The grandchildren disappeared with their phones and tablets. I wandered into the kitchen. Mostly because I needed a moment alone. The sink was overflowing with dishes. I began washing them automatically. Old habits. Nobody asked me to help. Nobody stopped me either. I stood there scrubbing plates while laughter echoed from the living room. At some point Jennifer entered the kitchen. Her husband Mark followed behind her. They didn't notice me immediately. I was standing near the sink, partially hidden behind an open cabinet door. They walked into the pantry area, speaking quietly. At first I paid no attention. Then I heard my name. And everything changed. Have you talked to her about it yet? Mark asked. Jennifer sighed. No. You need to. I know. When? Another pause. Then Jennifer answered. After Christmas. I froze. Something in her voice felt wrong. Not nervous. Not emotional. Calculated. Like someone discussing paperwork. What if she says no? Mark asked. Jennifer laughed softly. She won't. The confidence in her voice sent a chill through me. How could she be so sure? What exactly was she talking about? I remained completely still. The water continued running from the faucet, covering the sound of my breathing. Then Jennifer said something that made my stomach drop. It's too much house for one person anyway. Silence. Then Mark replied. That's not really the point. I know, Jennifer said. But she doesn't need all that space. My hands tightened around the plate I was holding. They were talking about my house. My house. The home David and I had spent 40 years paying for. The home where our children grew up. The home where every Christmas morning happened. The home where every birthday candle was blown out. The home where David took his last breath. And they were discussing it as if it already belonged to them. I wanted to walk away. I wanted to stop listening. But I couldn't. Because suddenly every strange conversation from the past year began replaying in my mind. The questions about property taxes. The questions about insurance. The questions about maintenance costs. The questions about legal documents. At the time they had seemed innocent. Now they felt different. Now they felt connected. Now they felt deliberate. What about Michael? Mark asked. Jennifer sighed again. He's on board. My heart sank. Michael too? He thinks it's the best option. The best option. For who? Certainly not for me. I pressed myself closer to the counter. Barely breathing. trying to hear every word. Then Jennifer lowered her voice. But I still caught enough. If we wait too long, things become complicated. Complicated. The word echoed inside my head. Complicated for whom? I wasn't sick. I wasn't incapable. I handled my finances. I drove myself everywhere. I maintained my home. I lived independently. What exactly was complicated? Then came the sentence I'll never forget. Not as long as I live. Jennifer said. We have to think about the future. Simple words. Reasonable words. But the tone behind them revealed everything. She wasn't talking about my future. She was talking about hers. And suddenly I understood something terrifying. My children had begun viewing me as a problem to solve. Not a mother. Not a person. A problem. An obstacle standing between them and whatever plans they had already made. The conversation ended when someone called them back into the living room. They left. Still unaware that I had heard every word. Still unaware that my entire understanding of our relationship had just changed. I stood alone in the kitchen. Staring at the sink. Feeling as though the floor beneath me had disappeared. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe there was an innocent explanation. Maybe they were discussing retirement planning. Maybe they were concerned about my well-being. Maybe. But deep down, I knew better. A mother always knows. Even when she doesn't want to. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. I smiled when required. Answered questions. Listened to stories. But mentally I was somewhere else. Watching. Observing. Paying attention. For the first time in years, I stopped making excuses for everyone. And once I stopped making excuses, I began seeing things clearly. Jennifer rarely asked how I felt. Michael only called when he needed information. The grandchildren barely knew me anymore. Every relationship seemed built on convenience. Not connection. Expectation. Not affection. And that realization hurt more than anything I had overheard. Later that night I found myself standing in front of an old family photo hanging in the hallway. David stood in the center. His arm around me. The children smiling beside us. Everyone looked happy. Connected. Safe. For a moment tears filled my eyes. Not because I missed the past. But because I finally understood something. The family in that photograph no longer existed. Maybe it hadn't existed for years. Maybe David had been the glue holding everything together. And once he was gone, everyone slowly drifted toward their true priorities. Around 9 o'clock people began leaving. Hugs. Goodbyes. Promises to stay in touch. The usual holiday performance. When my turn came, Jennifer hugged me quickly. Drive safe. That's all she said. Drive safe. Not I love you. Not thanks for coming. Not let's have lunch next week. Just drive safe. I smiled. Told her good night. And walked toward the door. But before I stepped outside, I heard something else. A conversation coming from the living room. Just a few words. Spoken casually. Almost carelessly. Yet powerful enough to stop me in my tracks. Michael's voice. Have you checked the estimate yet? Estimate. Jennifer answered immediately. Not yet. Estimate? What estimate? Then Michael added. We should know what it's worth before talking to her. The room suddenly felt cold. Very cold. Because there was only one thing they could be talking about. My house. I stepped outside into the freezing night air. Snowflakes drifted quietly beneath the streetlights. For a long moment I simply stood there. Unable to move. Unable to think. Unable to accept what I had just heard. Then I climbed into my car. Closed the door. And sat in silence. The engine wasn't running. The radio was off. The world felt strangely distant. And for the first time in my life, I asked myself a question no parent ever wants to ask. Do my children actually love me? Or do they simply love what I have? I didn't know the answer. But I was about to find out. Because the following week, I would discover a document that proved this wasn't just a conversation. It was a plan. A real plan. And my children had already set it in motion. End of part 2.